A kid no one's ever heard of walks into a dark alley full of trained killers and walks out without a scratch. A grown man begs for his life on his knees in front of a 13-year-old. A boy who mocked him for being weak gets dropped in 3 seconds flat and ends up bowing his head and asking to serve him. And somewhere in between all of that, a soldier who already died once gets a second shot at everything he lost the first time around. Stick with this one, because the kid at the center of all that chaos used to be a grown man, a veteran, a spearman who fought through wars most people in this story haven't even heard whispers of yet. He's back in his own childhood body now, and he remembers everything. Every battle, every mistake, every face of every friend he watched die because he wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or smart enough soon enough. This time he's not waiting around. Rewind 17 years. Damien, sometimes called Damon depending on who's talking to him, is lying in the mud on a battlefield that's already lost. Bodies everywhere. Men he trained with, fought beside, trusted with his life, all gone or going. He's bleeding out from 3 different wounds, and none of them are the one that's actually going to kill him. That one's inside his chest, and it's regret. He joined the army too late. He always knew it on some level, but dying tends to clarify things fast. If he'd picked up a spear 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier, he could have been someone. Instead, he's just another corpse on a pile that historians won't bother counting individually. His last thought isn't about glory or his name being remembered. It's simple, and it's brutal. If he had one more chance, just one, he wouldn't waste a single day of it. Then everything goes dark, and then it doesn't. He wakes up small, thin arms, soft hands that have never held a real weapon, a heartbeat that feels too light in his chest. For one disorienting second, he thinks this is some kind of afterlife trick. Then he sits up and catches his reflection in a cracked water basin and sees a face he hasn't worn in decades. 13 years old, skinny, alive. He presses 2 fingers against his own chest and feels something he thought was gone forever. His mana core, intact, untouched. In his old life, it had been cracked beyond repair after a battle that crippled him for years before it eventually killed him. Here, now, it's whole. 17 years. He's gone back 17 years before that battlefield ever happens. For a moment, just a moment, he lets himself feel something close to hope. Then his memory catches up with him, and hope curdles into something a lot colder. Because Damien remembers something his past self never figured out until it was far too late to matter. His uncle Parker, the man who was supposed to look after him after his parents died, didn't just neglect him. Parker engineered the whole collapse of his life on purpose. It wasn't bad luck that left a young Damien broke and alone. Parker stole his inheritance clean, every coin of it, and made sure there was no paper trail leading back to him. It wasn't some random string of misfortune that pushed him into the criminal underworld either. Parker had men in place to make sure he ended up exactly there, desperate enough to take jobs no one else would touch. The arrest that followed wasn't bad timing. It was the plan working exactly as designed. Even the forced military conscription that came after his release traces straight back to the same scheming uncle, quietly pulling strings from somewhere safe and comfortable. In his old life, Damien believed the world had simply been cruel to him, an orphan with terrible luck, nothing more. Now he knows better. Every disaster had a hand behind it, and that hand belonged to family. That single realization changes something in him instantly. The grief from his last life doesn't disappear, but it gets pushed aside by something sharper. Something that wants answers first and payback second. Except payback is going to arrive a lot sooner than anyone expects. He doesn't even get a full day to process any of it before the universe decides to test him. That night, 3 men slip into the house where he's staying. Professional, quiet. The kind of men who've done this before and expect a sleeping child to be the easiest job they've taken all year. They have no idea what's actually waiting for them. Damien hears the door long before they think they've been careful enough. His body might be 13, weak, untrained in this lifetime, but his instincts belong to a man who's survived more ambushes than he can count. He watches the lead attacker's shoulder dip a fraction before the swing comes. He catches the shift in weight in another man's stance right before he steps forward. None of it is magic. It's just years of reading bodies on actual battlefields, baked so deep into muscle memory that even this small, untrained frame still remembers how to use it. The first man swings a blade meant to end this in one motion. Damien's already moved before it arrives, sliding under the arc and driving a stolen kitchen knife into the back of the man's leg. The attacker screams and drops. 2 left. The second comes in fast, overconfident, the kind of fighter who's never had to fight someone who could actually see him coming. Damien reads the telegraph in his eyes a full second before the strike lands and steps wide instead of back, letting the blade cut empty air while he drives an elbow into the man's throat hard enough to drop him gagging to the floor. The third one, the one calling himself Muckman, finally hesitates. A grown assassin, hired muscle, suddenly facing a child who's already put 2 of his partners down without breaking a sweat. Muckman doesn't understand it. How does a 13-year-old read every single attack like he's seen it already? He has. That's the joke nobody else is in on yet. Damien doesn't kill him outright. Not yet. He pins him hard against the wall, knife at his throat, and asks the one question that matters. Who sent you? Muckman tries to bluff for about 3 seconds before the knife edge convinces him otherwise. He breaks fast, the way men who talk tough but never expected real consequences always do. The name that comes out of his mouth isn't a surprise to Damien at all. Parker. There it is. Confirmation, straight from the man's own hired blade. Muckman, possibly hoping honesty buys him mercy, doesn't get any. Damien finishes it quickly and without ceremony. There's no satisfaction in it, just a quiet sense that one loose thread has been cut. From there the trail isn't hard to follow. Muckman's information leads him to Montal, a mercenary who treats killing like any other transaction. No more emotional about it than a merchant closing a sale. Montal doesn't even get the chance to understand what's coming for him. He expects an easy payday, eliminating one inconvenient nephew. Instead, he runs into someone who's already survived worse than anything Montal could imagine, and the fight ends almost before it starts. 2 down, 1 left, and he's the one who matters most. Parker doesn't see it coming at all. As far as he knows, his orphan nephew is broke, friendless, and easy to ignore until he quietly disappears like the rest of the loose ends. He's comfortable, confident, completely unprepared for the kid who shows up at his door with calm eyes and a complete understanding of every single thing Parker thought he'd buried. Damien doesn't scream at him, doesn't waste time on a long speech either. He just lays it out, plainly, every piece of the conspiracy in order. The inheritance, the criminals, the arrest, the years stolen from him by a man who was supposed to be family. Parker's confidence cracks the moment he realizes this isn't a guess. This is someone who already knows everything, with total certainty, like he was there for all of it. Which, in a way that Parker will never understand, he actually was. The face Parker makes in that moment, the slow, horrified realization that the helpless nephew he wrote off years ago is standing in front of him calm, lethal, and completely unbothered, is worth more to Damien than any amount of gold ever could be. It doesn't end with words. Parker doesn't get the mercy he never gave anyone else either. Damien ends it there, and just like that, the man responsible for the worst years of his entire previous life is gone, erased before he can do any of that damage a second time. What follows isn't a celebration. Damien collects what's actually his, the inheritance that was stolen out from under him the first time around. And for once in either of his lives, he has resources behind him instead of nothing but bad luck and worse timing. But money was never really the point. He sits with it for exactly 1 quiet night, letting himself feel the weight of everything that just happened, before his mind shifts entirely toward the future, the real one, the one he actually died trying to survive the first time, because revenge was never going to be the whole story. Somewhere out there, a war is coming. He knows the rough shape of it even if the details are still hazy from this distance. Within roughly 5 years, conflict on a massive scale, forced conscription sweeping through every town, famine following close behind it. He lived through the start of that war once already and barely made it past the opening battles before everything caught up with him. This time he's not waiting until he's desperate and untrained to pick up a spear. This time he's starting now, at 13, with decades of battlefield knowledge nobody else on this entire continent currently possesses. There's something else too, something Damien remembers clearly from his old life that nobody else could possibly know about yet. A cultivation method. A way of building and circulating mana that won't actually be discovered by anyone else for another 15 years. He spent years mastering it back when it finally surfaced the first time around. Now he gets to use it over a decade ahead of schedule, while every noble-born talent around him is still working with outdated, inferior techniques. It's almost unfair how big an advantage that gives him. Almost. He starts immediately, working through the early stages of the technique in private, away from prying eyes. His body's weak, his reserves are tiny compared to what he remembers having, but the method itself works exactly as he recalls. Slowly, carefully, something that's been dormant for years starts waking back up inside him. With his uncle gone, his inheritance recovered, and a path toward real power finally open in front of him, Damien makes the decision that's going to define everything else that happens from here. He's done waiting around in some quiet town for life to happen to him. He's heading to the capital. That's where the real opportunities are. Military enlistment, training camps, the start of the path that turned him into a soldier in his last life. Except this time, he's not stumbling into it broke, desperate, and years too late. This time, he's walking in early, prepared, and carrying knowledge that no instructor, no rival recruit, and no general currently breathing has any way of matching. He packs light. There's not much from this old life worth carrying anyway, beyond the spear training buried somewhere deep in his memory, and a grim kind of patience that comes from already knowing exactly how badly things can go wrong if he wastes this chance. The road to the capital stretches out ahead of him, long and unfamiliar in this earlier version of the world he remembers. Somewhere along that road, recruits are gathering. Somewhere in that crowd, instructors are about to meet what they think is just another scrawny 13-year-old hoping to make it through basic evaluations. They have no idea what's actually walking toward them, because the boy approaching that capital isn't really 13 at all. Not where it counts. He's a man who's already buried every comrade he ever trusted, already lived through the opening moves of a war most of these people haven't even heard rumors of yet, and already decided that this time, nobody he cares about is going to die because he showed up too late to matter. This time, he's early. This time, he's ready. And the people about to meet him at that training camp have absolutely no idea what they're about to let through the front gate. The capital hits different than anything Damien remembers from this stretch of his life. Bigger walls, busier streets, more noise than a small-town kid should know what to do with. Except he's not actually a small-town kid on the inside. And none of this overwhelms him the way it would someone who hasn't already walked through a dozen cities just like it during a war that hasn't started yet. He finds the enlistment grounds easily enough, a wide, dusty field outside the main barracks, packed with hopeful recruits trying to look tougher than they are. Some flex for no reason, some stretch like they're about to run a race instead of get evaluated. A few stand quiet and serious, clearly trained by somebody back home who actually knew what they were doing. Damien stands among them, average height for his age, unremarkable in every visible way. Nobody looks twice at him. That's exactly how he wants it for now. The instructors running the evaluations start with the basics. Strength checks, a timed run around the field, crawling drills through mud pits that exist purely to weed out anyone who quits at the first sign of discomfort. Most recruits power through with effort written all over their faces, breathing hard, muscles shaking by the end. Damien moves through the same drills with something closer to efficient calm. His body's still 13, still nowhere near the conditioning he had in his last life, but his form is flawless. Every motion economical, no wasted energy, no panic, no wild flailing through the mud pit like half the boys around him. One of the evaluating instructors, a sharp-eyed man named Rayman, notices it before almost anyone else does. He's seen plenty of naturally strong recruits over the years. Strength isn't rare. What's rare is technique this clean on someone who's apparently never had formal training. Rayman makes a small note next to Damien's name and keeps watching. The spear drill comes next, and this is where things get interesting fast. Most recruits handle the practice spears like exactly what they are. Untrained kids holding a long stick and hoping not to embarrass themselves. Damien picks his up and something settles into place immediately, like reuniting with an old friend after years apart. His grip finds itself without thinking. His stance drops low and balanced on instinct alone. When it's his turn against the training dummy, he doesn't hesitate or fumble through awkward textbook strikes. He moves through a sequence that looks less like a recruit testing basic competency and more like a soldier running drills he's repeated 10,000 times before. Thrust, pivot, sweep, recover. Clean, fast, precise. A few other recruits stop what they're doing just to watch. Raymond's note next to Damien's name gets a lot longer. By the time the physical evaluations wrap up, word's already starting to move through the recruiting grounds about some scrawny kid who fights like he's been doing it for 20 years. Damien hears the whispers and ignores them completely. Reputation built on rumor means nothing yet. What matters is what happens once real training starts. That's when he meets the boy who's going to matter more than almost anyone else in this story. Apple stands near the front of the gathered recruits, tall for his age, confident without being arrogant about it, the kind of presence that naturally pulls attention even in a crowd full of people trying to look impressive. He watches Damien's spear sequence with genuine interest instead of the dismissive glance most recruits give each other. After the drills wrap, Apple walks over without any of the usual posturing recruits do when they're sizing up a potential rival. He just asks, plainly, where Damien learned to move like that. Damien gives him a half-true answer, something vague about an old family teacher, and Apple accepts it without pushing further. There's no jealousy in his expression, no wounded pride at seeing someone match or exceed his own obvious talent. If anything, he looks pleased, like finding genuine competition is more exciting to him than easy superiority would be. It's the start of something Damien recognizes immediately, even if Apple has no idea yet what he's looking at. In his old life, the name Apple eventually became attached to one of the greatest generals of the coming war, a legend whose tactical brilliance turned hopeless battles into victories. Meeting him now, this early, this unguarded, is something Damien never got the chance to experience the first time around. Friendly rivalry. That's the shape this relationship takes almost instantly. Two boys who recognize talent in each other and decide, without much discussion needed, that competing against someone actually worth competing against beats coasting through training unchallenged. Damien files away one quiet thought as they talk. Whatever alliance forms here, however friendly things stay, Apple is going to be the single hardest person to surpass in this entire generation. Maybe the single hardest person, period. That's not a problem for today, but it's worth remembering. Before the recruits get assigned to their training camps, Damien takes care of something else his old life never gave him the chance to set up early: business. He seeks out a merchant guild master named Work, an unremarkable-looking man with sharp eyes and an even sharper sense for opportunity. Most 13-year-olds walking into a guild hall asking about investment opportunities get laughed out the door. Damien doesn't get laughed at, mostly because he doesn't talk like a 13-year-old once the conversation actually starts. He doesn't reveal anything about regression or future knowledge, obviously, but he speaks with a confidence about coming instability, about merchant guilds becoming critical infrastructure once real conflict breaks out. That catches Work's attention in a way most pitches from grown men don't manage. Work's daughter Deal sits nearby through most of the conversation, half amused, half genuinely curious about this strange kid talking about war preparation and supply chains like he's already lived through it. At one point, Work jokes, mostly to needle his daughter, that maybe this odd young investor would make a fine future husband for her one day. Deal rolls her eyes hard enough that even Damien almost laughs. Nothing comes of the joke beyond that single moment, but it's the kind of small detail that sticks in memory anyway. By the end of the meeting, Damien's walked away with a modest stake in the Hamel Merchant Guild, a tiny investment by current standards that's going to look a lot less tiny once the war Work has no idea is coming actually arrives. One more piece of the future, quietly secured years ahead of schedule. With enlistment evaluations complete and his small business arrangement settled, Damien gets assigned along with dozens of other recruits to the third training camp, the place where raw potential either gets sharpened into something dangerous or quietly ground down into mediocrity. His designated platoon, the first, comes with its own personalities already locked in before he's even said a word to most of them. There's Brian, the existing platoon leader, a steady and fair young man who's earned the position through consistency rather than flash. He's the kind of leader who notices talent immediately and isn't threatened by it, which matters more than people realize once Damien starts standing out. There's Kyle, loud, brash, convinced of his own superiority in the specific obnoxious way that only teenagers who've never actually lost a real fight can manage. Kyle takes one look at Damien, hears the rumors about some scrawny new recruit supposedly impressing instructors, and decides immediately that this needs to be proven wrong in front of everyone. It doesn't take long for that confrontation to happen. During a free training period, Kyle calls Damien out directly, demanding a sparring match to settle who actually deserves attention around here. The other recruits gather fast, sensing exactly the kind of show this is about to become. Brian tries half-heartedly to talk Kyle down, already sensing how this is probably going to go, but Kyle's too committed to backing out now. Damien doesn't argue, doesn't trash-talk back, he just picks up a practice spear and waits. Kyle opens aggressive, swinging hard and fast, clearly expecting to overwhelm a smaller, supposedly inexperienced opponent through sheer force. For about half a second, it almost looks like it might work. Then Damien moves. He reads the strike before it fully commits, the same way he read 3 trained assassins a few weeks back, and steps just enough to the side that Kyle's momentum carries him slightly off balance. A light tap from the practice spear catches Kyle across the ribs before he's even recovered his footing. The crowd makes a small, surprised noise. Kyle, embarrassed, comes in again, faster this time, more controlled. It doesn't matter. Damien's already 3 moves ahead of whatever Kyle's body is planning to do next. Another clean strike, this one across the shoulder, drops Kyle's guard completely for a fraction of a second. That's all the opening needed. The third exchange ends with Kyle flat on his back in the dirt. Practice spear knocked clean out of his hands, staring up at a kid he was completely certain he'd dominate. The whole fight lasts less than 10 seconds. Silence holds for a beat before the recruits around them start murmuring, some impressed, a few outright stunned. Kyle lies there for a moment longer than necessary, less from injury and more from the sheer disbelief that this happened at all. What happens next is the part that actually matters, though. Kyle doesn't storm off angry. He doesn't make excuses or demand a rematch out of wounded pride. He just lies there a second longer, processing something, before sitting up slowly and looking at Damien with an expression that's shifted entirely from arrogant to something closer to genuine respect. He gets up, brushes the dirt off, and does something nobody expected from him. He bows his head, just slightly, and asks, with none of his usual swagger left in his voice, to be allowed to follow Damien's lead from here on out. It's not the kind of dramatic loyalty oath some stories build toward over chapters. It's quick, almost awkward, but completely sincere. Kyle's pride takes the hit and just decides this particular fight isn't worth holding on to stubbornly. Recognizing real strength when he sees it matters more to him than saving face in front of a crowd. Brian watches the whole exchange with quiet satisfaction. He's been platoon leader for a while now, and he recognizes immediately what just walked into his unit. Talent like this doesn't come around often, and leadership instinct like Damien's seems to carry is even rarer. Over the following days, Brian starts deferring to Damien more and more during tactical discussions, not because he's stepping down from his actual position, but because he's smart enough to recognize when someone in the room sees the battlefield more clearly than he does. It's not a power struggle, it's just good leadership recognizing better leadership and getting out of the way when it counts. Damien settles into platoon life faster than anyone really expects, given how recently he arrived. He teaches small practical things during downtime, tricks for conserving energy during long marches, ways to read terrain before a formation drill even starts, small adjustments that seem minor individually but add up into a platoon that's quietly outperforming its training schedule. Rayman, the instructor who first noticed his spear technique during enlistment, keeps a close eye on the first platoon's progress and starts noticing something unusual. They're improving faster than their training intensity should explain. Someone inside that platoon is teaching things that aren't part of the official curriculum. He has a guess about who. Not every relationship in the camp turns friendly this fast, though. The 4th platoon, led by a recruit with more confidence than self-awareness, takes an immediate dislike to the 1st platoon's sudden rising reputation. Their leader makes a habit of throwing insults whenever the platoons cross paths during drills, mocking Damien's age, mocking the platoon for supposedly getting lucky rather than actually being good. Damien doesn't take the bait, doesn't waste energy on petty exchanges that accomplish nothing. He's watched enough real wars to know that the loud ones rarely matter as much as they think they do, and the quiet ones usually end up deciding everything that counts. He just keeps training, keeps improving, keeps building something that's going to make all that mockery look very, very foolish before long. Because the camp's first major test is coming. A full platoon versus platoon competition. The kind of evaluation that decides reputations for the rest of training and beyond. 1st platoon against 2nd. 3rd platoon, led by a respectful and capable recruit named Gerard, against 4th. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a mysterious ring has been mentioned as a reward for whichever platoon claims first place. A detail nobody's explained the full meaning of yet, but one that's already got every competitive recruit in camp thinking hard about how badly they want to win. Damien wants it too, though not for the same reasons most of these recruits assume. He doesn't know exactly what that ring does, not yet. But something about how it's been mentioned, almost in passing, almost too casually, tells him it's worth more than whoever's running this competition is letting on. First place isn't optional. First place is the plan. The competition grounds get set up over the following days, and word spreads through the entire training camp that this isn't just some routine evaluation. Officers from higher up the chain are reportedly coming to observe. Reputations made here don't stay contained to one training camp. They follow recruits for years. Damien stands at the edge of the practice field the night before everything starts, looking out at the same dirt and torches that, in a war still years away, are eventually going to look very different. Burned, fought over, soaked in losses he remembers all too clearly. Not this time. This time he's not some desperate recruit stumbling into the army too late to matter. This time he's standing here early, prepared, surrounded by people who are starting to genuinely believe in him, and about to step into a competition that's going to put every bit of that future knowledge and battlefield instinct on full display. Tomorrow, 1st Platoon finds out exactly what they're capable of, and somewhere across the field, 4th Platoon's leader is about to find out the same thing the hard way. Morning comes fast, the way it always does right before something that actually matters. The training grounds have been transformed overnight into something closer to an actual battlefield. Marked lanes, observation platforms, banners marking which platoon stands where. Recruits who were lounging around joking yesterday now stand stiff and serious, suddenly aware that today counts for something real. Officers Damien's never seen before sit along the raised platform at the edge of the field. Word about visiting brass wasn't exaggeration. Whatever happens today, it's not staying contained to camp gossip. 1st Platoon gathers in a tight half-circle before their match against 2nd. Brian runs through the basics one more time. Formation assignments, fallback positions, the usual pre-fight checklist. Then he does something that's become routine over the past couple weeks. He looks to Damien and asks if there's anything to add. There is. Damien keeps it short, because long speeches before a fight waste energy better spent staying sharp. He walks through 2nd Platoon's likely formation based on what he's observed during shared drill sessions, points out their left flank tends to drift wide whenever they're pressured early, and lays out a simple wedge formation designed to exploit exactly that habit. Kyle, once the loudest skeptic in the platoon, nods along without a hint of his old arrogance. Brian repeats the plan back once to make sure everyone's locked in, then claps his hands together and calls it. The horn sounds. 2nd Platoon comes in confident, formation tight, clearly expecting an easy win against a unit they still half consider a fluke. For about 10 seconds it even looks plausible. Then the wedge formation does exactly what Damien said it would. 2nd Platoon's left flank, used to drifting wide under pressure, does precisely that the moment 1st Platoon pushes forward as one cohesive unit instead of scattering into individual matchups. The gap opens. Kyle, positioned right where Damien told him to stand, drives straight through it with 2 others trailing close behind, splitting 2nd Platoon's formation cleanly in half before they even register what's happening. From there, it's not really a contest anymore. Isolated and outflanked, 2nd Platoon's fighters get picked off one engagement at a time. Damien himself handles the platoon leader directly, a solid fighter by recruit standards, but nowhere close to dealing with someone who's already read his entire attack pattern within the first 3 exchanges. It ends with a clean disarm and the leader sitting in the dirt, more confused about how that happened than actually hurt. 1st Platoon wins decisively. Up on the observation platform, a couple of the visiting officers lean toward each other, talking quietly, clearly more interested in this outcome than the routine victory it might have looked like on paper. Rayman, watching from the sideline, allows himself a small, satisfied nod. His earlier instincts about this platoon weren't wrong. While 1st Platoon catches its breath, the second match of the morning gets underway across the field. 3rd Platoon against 4th. This one matters to Damien for a different reason. Gerard, leading 3rd Platoon, has always struck him as steady and fair, someone competing hard but never resorting to cheap tricks or unnecessary cruelty. And standing just behind Gerard, quietly feeding tactical suggestions throughout the match, is Apple. Damien watches closely, partly out of genuine curiosity, partly because understanding exactly how Apple thinks under pressure feels important for reasons he's not ready to explain to anyone else yet. What he sees confirms something he already suspected. Apple's suggestions aren't flashy. No grand gambits, no risky all-or-nothing plays. Just clean, efficient reads of where 4th Platoon is weakest, fed to Gerard one calm observation at a time. It's restrained in a way that feels almost familiar, like watching a much younger, much less experienced version of the kind of tactical mind Damien spent years learning to respect on actual battlefields. 3rd Platoon wins clean, methodical, without much drama. Gerard's the one taking the bows afterward, as he should, but Damien notices several recruits glancing toward Apple with newfound curiosity too. He's not the only one starting to see what's really standing behind that victory. 4th Platoon's leader doesn't take the loss well. He never really takes anything well. He storms off the field already loudly blaming his own teammates for the defeat, conveniently leaving out the part where his own tactical decisions opened most of the gaps 3rd Platoon exploited. That attitude is exactly why 1st Platoon's eventual match against 4th is going to feel less like a competition and more like something closer to overdue payback. It doesn't happen immediately, though. Tournament structure pushes several other matches through the day first, and 1st Platoon watches most of them from the sideline, sizing up whoever they might face deeper into the bracket. Damien uses the downtime efficiently, quietly observing every other platoon's habits, filing away small details that probably won't matter for today, but might matter eventually. The afternoon brings the match everyone's actually been waiting for. 4th Platoon's leader spends the walk onto the field, doing what he always does, running his mouth. He calls out toward 1st Platoon's side loud enough for half the crowd to hear, throwing out the same tired insults about luck, about age, about how today's the day reality catches up with all the recent hype. Kyle, standing near Damien, mutters something under his breath about really wanting to be the one who shuts that mouth personally. Damien just shakes his head slightly. Not yet. There's a better way to handle this than letting frustration call the shots. The horn sounds. 4th Platoon comes in aggressive from the opening second, clearly coached to overwhelm through raw intensity rather than careful positioning. For a platoon that just lost earlier in the day to 3rd Platoon's measured tactics, it's a strange decision, leaning even harder into exactly the kind of disorganized aggression that already cost them once. Damien's prepared for it specifically because of that. He calls a tight defensive formation at the very start, almost passive-looking from the outside, absorbing 4th Platoon's initial rush without giving up significant ground. Several spectators on the platform murmur, wondering if 1st Platoon's actually struggling for once. They're not. They're waiting. 4th Platoon's leader, frustrated that his aggressive opening hasn't produced the immediate breakthrough he expected, pushes forward himself, abandoning a more cautious position to try forcing the issue personally. It's exactly the mistake Damien was hoping for. The moment the leader overcommits, 1st Platoon's formation shifts instantly, opening a lane that funnels him directly toward Damien instead of any of his teammates. It's not an accident. It's been the plan since before the horn even sounded. 4th Platoon's leader, to his credit, doesn't hesitate once he realizes who he's facing. He swings hard, fast, throwing every bit of frustration from this entire day into the strike. Damien reads the whole thing well before it lands. Shoulder dips early. Weight shifts forward too soon. A fighter announcing his own attack a half-second before he even realizes he's doing it. He sidesteps clean, lets the strike whistle past, and answers with a single controlled counter that catches the leader across the ribs hard enough to fold him forward. A second follow-up sweep drops him flat onto his back, practice spear spinning out of reach across the dirt. The whole exchange takes less time than Kyle's fight did weeks earlier. 4th Platoon's leader lies there a moment, chest heaving, staring up at the same sky he was loudly mocking 1st Platoon under just minutes ago. The crowd that gathered for this specific matchup, drawn by all his earlier trash talk, doesn't hold back its reaction. Laughter ripples through several sections of onlookers, not cruel exactly, just the natural response to watching someone's mouth finally catch up with their actual ability. He doesn't get back up gracefully. He doesn't ask to follow Damien's lead the way Kyle eventually did. He just sits there in the dirt, humiliated in front of the exact audience he spent all day trying to impress with noise instead of substance, while his own platoon mates avoid looking directly at him. With their leader down and the formation thoroughly broken by the loss of their most aggressive piece, the rest of 4th Platoon folds quickly. 1st Platoon finishes the match clean, decisive, without needing to drag it out any longer than necessary. Up on the observation platform, the visiting officers aren't whispering quietly anymore. A couple of them are openly discussing something, glancing between Damien and the field with the kind of attention that doesn't usually land on 13-year-old recruits this early in their training. Rayman watches the same exchange and allows himself something close to a knowing smile. Whatever's happening with that kid, it's not slowing down anytime soon. Brian claps Damien on the shoulder once the platoon regroups, genuine pride written across his face. Kyle's grinning wide enough that it looks like it might hurt, clearly enjoying the outcome more than almost anyone else on the field. Even some of the quieter platoon members who haven't said much to Damien directly over the past weeks seem to be looking at him a little differently now. Across the field, Gerard offers a respectful nod once 3rd Platoon catches sight of the result, the kind of acknowledgement one disciplined leader gives another without needing words attached to it. Apple's harder to read, standing a step behind Gerard with an expression that's part impressed, part something more calculating, like he's already filing this information away for later. Damien notices that look and files away his own thought right alongside it. Apple watching this closely isn't nothing. Whatever friendly rivalry exists between them right now, it's only going to get more interesting as both of them keep climbing. By the time the day's matches wrap up, 1st Platoon and 3rd Platoon sit clearly ahead of everyone else in the standings, both having won through very different approaches that share one thing in common: actual thinking behind every move instead of just throwing bodies forward and hoping for the best. That sets up exactly the matchup most of the camp is already talking about as torches get lit for the evening. 1st Platoon against 3rd, Damien against Apple, in whatever shape that confrontation ends up taking once the next round actually begins. The reward for whoever ultimately claims 1st place hasn't gone unmentioned all day either. That mysterious ring keeps coming up in conversations around camp, recruits speculating wildly about what it actually does, some guessing enchantment, some guessing rank advancement, nobody actually knowing for certain. Damien still doesn't know exactly what it does either. But the way it's been mentioned, almost deliberately vague, with instructors deflecting whenever someone asks directly, tells him it's worth a lot more than whatever surface explanation everyone's been given. He wants it. Not for bragging rights, not even really for whatever practical advantage it offers, though that matters too. He wants it because something about this entire competition, the visiting officers, the unusual reward, the timing of it all, feels like it's pointing towards something bigger than a simple training camp evaluation. Whatever it actually is, finding out is going to require getting through Apple first. As torches burn low and recruits start drifting back toward their barracks for the night, Damien stands a moment longer at the edge of the field, replaying the day's matches in his head the way he used to replay actual battles back when the stakes were a lot higher than a training competition. 4th Platoon's leader humiliated, 2nd Platoon outmaneuvered cleanly, Gerard and Apple advancing through quiet competence rather than flash. And somewhere ahead, waiting in whatever round comes next, the one recruit in this entire camp who might actually be able to match him step for step. Tomorrow's going to answer a question Damien's been sitting with since the moment he met Apple weeks ago. Just how far does that rivalry go once it actually gets tested? The next morning brings a different kind of energy across the training grounds. Yesterday's matches cleared out most of the bracket, leaving exactly the matchup everyone in camp has been waiting for since the standings went up the night before. 1st Platoon against 3rd, Damien against Apple. The visiting officers from yesterday haven't left. If anything, more of them have shown up, word apparently traveling fast about whatever happened on this field over the past 24 hours. Rayman stands near the front of the observation line again, arms crossed, watching with the kind of focus he hasn't shown for any other match so far. Brian runs through formations one final time before the horn, though there's less he can actually plan for here than in previous matches. 3rd Platoon doesn't have an obvious weakness to exploit. Gerard's solid across the board, and whatever Apple's feeding him tactically has been clean every single time. Kyle, standing nearby, mutters something about this being the real test. He's not wrong. The horn sounds. Both platoons advance with noticeably more caution than yesterday's matches, neither side rushing into an obvious mistake the way 4th Platoon did. Gerard holds a balanced formation, methodical, patient. Brian mirrors it, looking to Damien more than once for adjustments as the two units circle and probe each other's positions without committing fully. For the first time in this entire competition, 1st Platoon isn't simply walking through an obviously inferior opponent. 3rd Platoon adapts in real time, shifting positioning the moment Brian's formation tries to angle toward a flank, closing gaps before they fully open. It's the kind of responsive defense that doesn't come from raw talent alone. Someone behind that platoon is reading the field just as fast as Damien is. Apple. Standing just behind Gerard's shoulder, Apple watches everything with the same calm focus Damien remembers from the earlier match against 4th Platoon. Except now that attention is pointed directly at countering whatever 1st Platoon tries next. Minutes pass without either side gaining real ground, a stalemate that's unusual for how decisively every other match in this competition has gone. The crowd, expecting another quick demonstration like yesterday's, leans forward instead, sensing something different unfolding. Damien eventually breaks the deadlock himself, choosing to engage directly rather than continuing to probe from a distance. He steps forward, signaling Kyle and two others to commit to a tight push on the right side, while he moves to test Gerard's flank personally. Gerard meets him without hesitation, spear raised, stance solid. He's not the most naturally gifted fighter Damien's faced, not even close to what Kyle eventually became after training under better instruction, but he's disciplined in a way that closes most obvious openings before they can be exploited. It takes longer than any other individual exchange in this competition, but eventually Damien's experience wins out. A feint draws Gerard's guard wide for just long enough, and a clean follow-up strike catches him solidly enough to end the exchange. Gerard goes down without complaint, immediately calling out to his remaining platoon members to adjust rather than wasting time on frustration. With Gerard out, the formation Apple's been quietly directing loses its anchor point. Kyle's push on the right finally breaks through cleanly, First Platoon's numbers advantage starting to show, now that Third Platoon's most experienced fighter is sitting in the dirt. It should be over within the next minute or two, except Apple doesn't just stand back and watch his platoon lose. For the first time in this entire tournament, he steps forward himself, picking up a spear and engaging directly instead of coaching from behind. The difference is immediate and obvious to everyone watching. Where Gerard was solid but conventional, Apple moves with something closer to genuine instinct, the kind of natural read for combat that doesn't usually show up this early in someone's training. He doesn't overpower anyone through strength. He just always seems to be standing exactly where the fight is about to go next, like he's 3 moves ahead of whoever he's facing without needing to think about it consciously. Damien, watching from across the field as Apple cuts down 2 First Platoon recruits in quick succession, allows himself something close to genuine excitement for the first time in this entire competition. There it is. That's the talent he remembers becoming a legend on actual battlefields someday. He steps in personally before Apple can do any more damage, the two of them finally meeting in the middle of a field that's gone mostly quiet except for the sound of their spears. The exchange that follows is unlike anything else in this tournament. Apple opens with a quick probing strike, testing rather than committing. Damien reads it easily enough, but the follow-up comes faster than he expects, a second strike chasing the first, close enough that there's barely room to fully capitalize on reading the opener. He's forced to actually defend properly for the first time all day. For several exchanges, neither of them gains a clear advantage. Apple reads Damien's counters almost as quickly as Damien reads his openings, adjusting mid-exchange in a way that feels less like a 13-year-old recruit and more like someone who's been doing this far longer than his actual age suggests. It's the closest fight Damien's had since regressing. Eventually, experience wins out over raw natural talent, the way it usually does when the gap in actual battlefield knowledge is this wide. Damien baits a slightly larger opening than he's given Apple all match, lets him commit just enough, and turns the counter into a clean disarm that ends the exchange before Apple can adjust back. Apple's practice spear hits the dirt. He stands there a second, breathing hard, looking more impressed than disappointed. First Platoon's win is confirmed a moment later, the last of Third Platoon's recruits unable to hold the line without their 2 strongest fighters still standing. The crowd's reaction is louder than anything else all tournament. Even some of the visiting officers are openly applauding, no longer bothering to keep their reactions contained to quiet conversation. Apple offers a hand once both of them catch their breath. Genuine respect written across his face instead of any bitterness about the loss. "Good fight," he says simply. "Means it too." Damien shakes it, equally sincere. He doesn't say what he's actually thinking, that he just got the closest test of his abilities since coming back, that whatever rivalry forms between them over the coming years is going to be worth watching closely. With First Platoon's victory secured and the tournament's top spot decided, the recruits gather near the observation platform for the closing ceremony, where the mysterious reward everyone's been speculating about all day finally gets explained. The ring, it turns out, isn't just some random trinket. According to the officiating instructor, it's an old item recovered from a previous campaign, carrying a minor but genuine enchantment that helps stabilize mana flow during early cultivation stages. Rare, valuable, exactly the kind of advantage that could shave real time off someone's growth if used correctly. Damien's hand closes around it once it's presented, feeling a faint hum of dormant enchantment settle against his palm. another small piece of the future, secured years ahead of where it belongs. That night, back in the barracks, Damien sits with the ring for a long while before actually putting it on, turning it over slowly while the rest of 1st Platoon celebrates around him. Kyle's loudly recounting the day's fights to anyone who'll listen. Brian's quietly proud in the corner. Even some of the quieter recruits seem to be warming up to the idea that they're part of something that's clearly heading somewhere important. Damien lets himself enjoy it, just for tonight. Tomorrow brings more training, more preparation, more steps toward a war he still remembers all too clearly from a life that technically hasn't even happened yet in this timeline. 5 years. That's roughly how long he has before everything he's preparing for actually arrives. 5 years to build a foundation strong enough that when the conscription notices go out, when the famine starts squeezing every town across the kingdom, when merchant guilds become the only thing standing between regular people and total collapse, he's not scrambling to catch up the way he was the first time around. He thinks about Apple, about how much stronger that rivalry is going to push both of them to become over the coming years. He thinks about Kyle's loyalty, about Brian's quiet leadership, about an entire platoon slowly turning into something that might actually survive what's coming instead of becoming another nameless casualty count. He thinks, too, about everyone he failed to save the first time, faces that are still strangers in this timeline, people who haven't even met him yet, but who he's already quietly determined to protect this time around. It's not going to be easy. None of what's coming ever is. But for the first time since waking up in this smaller, weaker body, Damien feels something he hasn't felt in longer than he can remember. Actual hope that this time might go differently. Slipping the ring onto his finger, he feels that faint hum settle deeper, mana responding just slightly easier than it did even an hour ago. Small, incremental, but real progress, exactly the kind he's going to need 1,000 times more of before this is over. Outside, the camp's torches burn low across grounds that, in another version of this story, eventually turned into something a lot more brutal than a training competition. Not this time, he reminds himself again. Not if he has anything to say about it. Somewhere out there, beyond the walls of this training camp, the kingdom keeps moving toward a future only Damien fully understands the shape of. Nobles plotting in rooms he hasn't entered yet. A military buildup that hasn't started showing its real urgency yet. A war machine slowly waking up, years before anyone outside a few very powerful people realizes it's even stirring. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a 13-year-old recruit who used to be a dead soldier keeps training, keeps preparing, keeps quietly assembling everything he's going to need long before anyone else even understands there's a clock running. The training camp competition ends with 1st Platoon on top, a ring secured, a rivalry forged, and a platoon that started to believe in something bigger than themselves without fully understanding why yet. But camp life isn't forever. Graduation looms ahead, and beyond it, real assignments, real ranks, real stakes that don't reset just because a sparring match ends. Damien's already thinking past all of it, toward names he hasn't met yet, toward battles that haven't happened yet, toward a war that's still gathering itself somewhere just past the horizon of everything anyone else in this camp can currently see. This time, he tells himself one more time, closing his hands slowly into a fist. This time, he's not going to be too late.